Okay, so for this video, we're going to be talking about some basic sewing skills because we're going to get started on making our sock puppet. So far, we've already made the sock body, mouth, and we've hot glued on the eyes. So that's the first part of making the project. Everyone's sock body will look very, very similar, and then it's the attachments that you put onto your sock puppet that really make it kind of create your character that you're trying to make. So there's some different things that you're going to need to know and some different tools that you'll need. A couple of things that you'll need every time that you set to work is your needle, your pin cushion for your table that has some pins in it. You'll need your thread color, whatever thread color that you choose to use, some fabric scissors, and then other materials depending upon what you plan on making for that day. So first thing I'm going to teach you is how to actually put the thread through the needle and get it ready to be used. So I'm going to take some thread and I'm going to cut a length of thread depending on how much thread you need. You don't want to get too much or it'll knot up on you as you start sewing. You'll have to thread your needle. And then this is what most people don't know. You're going to take your thread and you're going to get both ends even. So now I have, see if you can see that on the dark, I have both of the ends of thread and they're even at the bottom. Once they're even at the bottom, I'm going to put a knot at the end of the thread. So to do that, the easiest way I have found to do this is to wrap it around your finger like this, and then use your thumb and your other finger to kind of roll it off, and then you put those two fingers together and you pull, and all of that rolled up thread will create your knot. That takes a little bit of practice, but once you get the hang of it, it's actually quite simple to knot your thread that way. Okay, so now you're going to determine what you're going to make. So let's say we're going to make a couple of arms to go onto our project. So to do that, we know that we need to have two arms the same size and the same thickness. So I'm going to take my felt and I'm going to cut that, this, and then I'm going to make two rectangles the same size. So to do that, I'm going to fold that over, and I have to make sure that when I get one piece is going to be an arm, I have to be able to fold it over and it's going to be thick enough to make the arm. So you want your rectangle to be fairly wide, and then I'm going to trim this so that those pieces are about the same. Okay, then I'm going to take, and because I know that these would be the same size, I'm going to take my scissors. I'm going to cut that. So now I have created, whenever I'm not using my needle, I stick it in that pin cushion. I've created two separate pieces to be used for arms. Okay, now I have a decision to make on this. When I make my arm, do I want it flat with wire in it so that the arm can bend and hold its shape, or do I want it puffy, like it has some stuffing in it? So depending upon which of those that you want for your creature or your puppet, you need to have the right material. So I'm going to make mine so that the arm bends. So what I want to do is I'm going to take some wire and I'm going to make it the length of my piece. So I kind of lay my wire on there like this. And then I'm not going to use the fabric scissors. I'm actually going to use the other scissors to cut my wire, or I might even use a wire cutter. But now I have my wire that I'm going to be able to add into this once I'm finished sewing. So I can either sew it while the wire's in it, or I can put the wire in later. So I'll just leave the wire in it because it's fairly easy to do that. So I'm going to take my needle and thread, and I will start on one end. I'm going to leave this end open in case I want to add a hand. So I'm going to start on one end. I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to put it here under just the top layer, and I'm going to pull that through like that. Now the reason I'm going to do that is so that the knot is now hidden in between the two layers. But once I have that started, then I'm going to go down through both layers and I want to make sure I make a very short straight stitch, and then I come back up through both layers like this. Now something that I like to do that kind of helps me is I'm going to use these pins to hold my piece together as I'm sewing. Then it's a lot easier to sew as I'm going. If I just use the pins to hold it together. To use a pin, you stick down through both layers like that, and then you push it back up through both layers. And that's how you put your pins in. You don't want to stick your pins in like this, because then it looks like a voodoo doll, and you cannot, that won't hold. So, and plus you've got a point here that's going to poke you. So you want to be able to put your pins in like this. Okay, so now I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to go down through, and I try to make my stitches the same length and the same distance apart, and that just makes it look like a very cleaner stitch. Now I would probably use blue thread or a darker thread when I'm sewing this, so that I don't see the thread, but I wanted to use the lighter color thread so you could actually see my stitches in the demonstration. Okay, so this stitch, I wanted to do that. This is too long. You don't want that long of a stitch. You want to try to keep them a little bit smaller and neater. It just looks like a nicer job sewing. So as you get better at this, it becomes a lot easier, and you can actually start going a little more quickly, because you figure out, well, if I go down through both, and then I can come back up through both, and it just can go quicker like that. All right, now once I'm finished, or get to the end, I'm ready to tie off, or once I only have about this much extra thread, I don't want to go longer than that, I want it about this much, then it's time to tie off. So here's how you tie off. You go down, or you go through your thread, or your piece, and then I'm going to flip this over on the back, and I'm going to go through the felt, but instead of pulling it all the way through, do you see the loop? I'm going to go with my needle through those loops. And I go once, I'm going to do that one more time. You have to do it twice to make a knot. So I go through it again, and then that forms my knot. I want to pull that knot up close to it so that my thread is nice and snug, and then I use my fabric scissors to cut. Now, if I had finished all of this, then I could also go ahead and cut out a piece of a hand or something like that and attach. And then, once I have my attachments, I would use a paint bottle, and I would put my piece on the paint bottle like this.